Right. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on teaching mixed methods research with confidence. There will be quite a few of us joining today. So while we're waiting for everyone to log in, if you could share with us where you're joining from in the chat. And if you want to share what mixed methods book you've used in the past, if you've used one, we'd love to hear about that too. But please tell us where you're joining from. My name's Andrea Bergoa. I am the higher education course adoption marketing manager here at APA, and I will be moderating this session today. So if you have any questions, please let me know. I will be going through a few housekeeping items before we get started, and as we allow everyone to continue to trickle in. So again, thank you for joining us today for this session on teaching mixed methods research with confidence. Just a few items to check off our list before we start. All attendees are muted and we have cameras off, but there are lots of ways to interact with us today. Reactions are turned on. We, of course, also have the chat and we have Q&A. So please use chat to communicate with your fellow attendees. If you have questions for our presenter or myself, please use the Q&A button or a direct message in the chat. Um, Post-webinar resources, as soon as it's available, we will send you a copy of the recording that includes the chat transcript. And you will also be receiving an attendance certificate for being here today. So expect that in the next week. That's not an automated process, so it does take us a little bit to get those out. So again, welcome, welcome. Jen, I'm going to turn it over to you now, and I will answer any questions that our audience has in the chat, but please enlighten us on teaching mixed methods research with confidence.
Thank you so much, Andrea. So first of all, thank you so much to APA for partnering with me on this wonderful project. I'm really excited to speak with everyone today about teaching mixed methods research with confidence. My name is Jen Katz Bonincontro. Bonincontro is Italian for good encounter, good to meet you. So really fantastic to meet everyone today. And this is a wonderful opportunity for me to learn a little bit from you as well in terms of your mixed methods research experiences and your teaching experiences when you teach and mentor students at all different levels. So today I'm going to be talking about my book, How to Mix Methods, a guide to sequential, convergent, and experimental research designs. And this came out with APA in July 2024. So just want to say thank you to my editors and thank you to everyone who worked with me on this project. I'm really excited to speak with you a little bit. And to kick us off, what we're going to do is a poll, and we're going to talk a little bit or share a little bit about our experiences with mixed methods. So in a minute, Andrea is going to run a poll with 3 questions that will ask you about your experience with mixed methods, what designs you've used, and then if you've incorporated mixed methods into any of your research methods classes that you currently teach or anticipate teaching in the future. The next part of this webinar, I'm going to talk about my inspiration for writing a mixed methods book and how this came to be among the wonderful landscape of mixed methods resources, textbooks, and books that are out there. The third part is about reasons to use mixed methods. So the question is, why use mixed methods versus conduct a single method study? And then the fourth part, I'm going to talk about the design of the book and discuss what mixed methods designs that are covered and why I covered certain designs, which kind of make this book unique and set it apart and differentiate it from the books that are already published out there on mixed methods in general. And the last part, I'm going to talk about unique book features of this particular book. So how to use the book. I'm going to talk about some 10 mixed methods elements and example assignments I'm also going to address some of the questions that people pose when registering for this webinar concerning any roadblocks to teaching with mixed methods and false myths. And then with our remaining time left over after we get through these 5 different areas, we're going to take your questions, and Andrea is going to pose the questions to me so that we can have a little bit more of like a fireside chat kind of feel. So let's get started. So I'm going to go to the first slide, and that includes our special questions. So let me move this little Zoom video. Thank you so much for running that poll. So you can see the questions up there. So the first one being just very simply just to open up to the audience and get a sense for your experience. Have you ever conducted research or evaluation using mixed methods design? And here I include a definition for you in case you're new to mixed methods or wondering what the specific definition might be. So this is from my book. Mixed methods research is the purposeful design, combination, and integration of at least one qualitative and at least one quantitative research method into a comprehensive research project that incorporates multiple ways of making sense out of the social world. And then you can see up there, you might have already done question number 2. But the question number 2 is then within mixed methods, what special designs have you encountered and used directly? Sequential, convergent, uh, experimental, or not sure because there's so many different ones out there in the literature. And then the last question is, do you teach any mixed methods designs in your classes? And I'll give you a minute just to have a chance to go through those 3 different questions and provide your answer.
Yeah, responses are slowing down, so we'll probably end the poll in about 10 seconds. Thank you to everyone who has participated. We appreciate it, and we will share the results in 5, 4, 3, 2. Oh, some last minute people. I don't want to cut you off. Okay, here we go. All right, there are results.
All right, so sequential is 44, convergent is 30%. Experimental is 18 and not sure. I'm glad we put that up there, not sure. This special nomenclature for the design. You may have used 37% because that'll go to some points that I present on clarifying the different names for the designs and learning about those. And then the last question, do you currently teach? Okay, so we have pretty much almost an even split there. 47% yes, and 53% no for teaching. Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone, for um, answering and actually having a chance to see that we're all in good company, that we have a variety of different backgrounds and experiences. And so that's a wonderful way to kick off the webinar. And so that goes really well into the next part. So, number 2, I'm going to talk about the inspiration for this particular book in 3 different parts. And the first part is really to help students in the social sciences get excited about research. So, what I love about APA Research Methods books is they really speak to a variety of different disciplines. It's not just psychology, but a lot of related disciplines in the social sciences. And so, for instance, I'm a professor in education in the School of Education at Drexel University in Philadelphia. I have a courtesy appointment in psychology, and I collaborate with a lot of people that are in educational psychology or psychology, and not just in education. And so I really wanted to be inspired to create a book that people could use, not just in psychology, but in a lot of other disciplines as well. And in particular, I start off the book by talking about shedding fears and directly talking about anxiety that people have in terms of learning research methods as a student, and then in terms of publishing and getting grants. There's also anxiety around having that perfect sort of methodological design for your project. And so I take sort of a psychological approach in writing the book in terms of talking directly to people about how they feel in terms of their own research capacity. And when I mentor students, we call it research self-efficacy, like your belief in your ability to do research. So the other aspect to that is to break through methodological stigmas. And this is such a wonderful and exciting time to be a social scientist because, in terms of the history of methods, we're at a juncture now where people are experimenting and combining methods in a variety of different ways. And when I was a PhD student, for example, we did not have mixed methods classes in our College of Education at the University of Oregon, where I went. And so I became interested in mixed methods and sort of just had to browse around in the literature. And then when I became an assistant professor, take on learning for my own, and so I learned through professional organizations. And what I've noticed is that these methodological camps in terms of being quant only or qual only, and one perhaps being better or superior over the other, still remain with doctoral students to this day, although it's not quite as fiercely, staunchly separated. But I decided to talk about mixing methods in terms of using a very simple metaphor. And so I introduced the process as a baking process because I love to bake. And what I noticed when I first started learning how to bake is that I would rush through the process, especially when I saw lumps when I was mixing batter. So I use the metaphor of mixing batter as a way of learning for the first time to mix methods. And then I talk a little bit in the book about being okay with having some lumps at first and adjusting your design continuously in an iterative process in order to find that ideal design, because there's a lot that needs to be worked out in terms of not only joining the separate strands of quantitative and qualitative research, but also working in a team or with community partners and participants in the research process. So I really wanted this book to be a very friendly, sort of cozy book, almost like a companion for you when you're at your computer, or a companion when you're working with teams and starting to develop new projects. So that would be a very friendly and accessible way to shed fears and get interested in learning new mixed methods. So, as I discussed, the second aim is really to help people new to mixed methods learn and hopefully embrace the different possibilities. And I think possibility is really key here because there are a lot of different design choices to be made along the way. Also, because the field is so rapidly expanding, and to stay abreast of the literature is quite a feat, especially when you're looking in the journal Mixed Methods Research, which is sort of like the gold standard of where a lot of really high quality projects are published. But in chapter number 1, I talk about navigating complicated nomenclature and, in particular, distinguishing between single method, multi method, and mixed methods. So I go a little bit into sort of the research history to see how did we evolve to where we are right now, and why did people get interested in mixed methods and not just stick with a tried and true. The third aim of the book is really to make it easier to understand different designs and to sort of break them down using a step-by-step method. In my first research methods book, which was published by APA in 2022, it was called How to Interview and Conduct Focus Groups. What I did is I worked very closely with a couple of different editors and also the series editor, Dr. Art Nezu, who coincidentally also happens to be at Drexel. Although we didn't know it at the time, we were introduced while we were at APA. We didn't know that we were both from Drexel. But in working with him, we really tried to design a research methods book that would be very friendly to students and break things down in steps, but yet at the same time still have flexibility that they could be adapted and that other resources could be consulted in the crafting of one's design. So I do use a step-by-step method with very clear diagrams, and then I give other kinds of suggestions of resources to go and look at for a deeper dive into a particular area. One of the things that we noticed in combing through various published journal articles, especially from APA journals, is that there were a lack of experimental and arts-based mixed methods um, techniques covered in different books. So, what I did to prepare for this book proposal when I submitted it to APA is I combed through different APA based journals as well as education journals, but I wanted it to focus primarily on APA journals because I wanted to speak to psychological science and the place mixed methods has and the potential it has to advance psychological science. I also looked at as many mixed methods books as possible. So I was just a fiend on Amazon, ordering as many books as possible and going to different libraries or downloading different chapters so that I could be very confident that I had a sense of the landscape of what already had been published with books. And I noticed that I wanted to speak to psychological science, that there wasn't a lot of information on experimental designs for mixed methods. And a lot of people would publish experiments and then speak to an interview that they did, but they might not necessarily call it a true experimental mixed methods design. So I do have a chapter devoted specifically to experimental mixed methods, and I could not find that anywhere else in any other book. So I thought it would be helpful for people who are interested in quasi-experimental designs and experimental designs to have a chapter in that area. I also found it very intriguing that arts-based methods are increasingly being used in health and creative art therapies. So I do have a short section in there. The other thing that I noticed in doing sort of a lay of looking at the lay of the land is that there's great confusion about the topic of integration and joint displays. And there were few concise yet comprehensive resources. And so we wanted to make a book that was not too long because people are not interested in reading 300-page textbooks. So we wanted to have something that was relatively concise, but you could use it with other research methods resources. So you could use this book with other books that are mandated by your program or mandated by your university to use when teaching research methods. So why use mixed methods? Um, I included this information from my first chapter because I think it's really important. Everyone comes to a place of learning by being critical to the method, critical or asking critical questions about the methods that one uses. And in fact, when you look at the APA mixed methods journal article reporting standards, the first thing you have to do is provide a rationale for why one would use mixed methods um, in the very beginning of your paper. And so I really want to spend time in chapter one addressing, okay, why do we even want to use mixed methods? And what are the potential benefits when comparing it to just a quant only or a qual only type of study? So for me, in thinking about this for probably about a year, I came up with these different sort of reasons. And the first reason I would suggest is using quantitative methods with qualitative methods to tackle incomplete understandings. So I think that's really critical because sometimes when we assess students or have large scale studies that rely only on measurement, there are a lot of voices that can be uncovered by coupling measurement with qualitative research methods to help us understand why and how that data makes sense. And so things can sometimes feel glossed over or not completely understood from the perspective of a certain group of individuals until we take the time to couple quantitative measurement with qualitative data collection. So again, addressing shortcomings of single methods. So single study investigations might examine whether a measurement tool is truly responsive to certain cultural groups, and question the cultural validity, for example, of that measurement tool by using exploratory focus groups to better understand which items to incorporate in a revised tool or a tool that's designed specifically to address the needs of a particular community. The other thing that I find really fascinating about mixed methods is the it has the potential to understand what I call elusive, fleeting, or complicated dimensions of human experience. And so it gives a richer portrait, if you will. And I use portrait sort of as a metaphor, not literally, not a literal art portrait, but portrait as a metaphor for understanding the richness and the texture of human experience. The third reason is I would say that a lot of young people I work with and teach, supervise, mentor. I just had a fantastic meeting with undergrads are more and more interested in doing research in their field, but also outside their field, and they're very open to being interdisciplinary. And so, young people are really interested in stretching their methodological skill sets by learning new aspects about methods. And I think that this field has an intuitive and widespread appeal with an appreciation for both quantitative and qualitative instead of getting stuck in those camps. Like when I was a student, even when I was an undergrad sociology student, there was like the quantitative researchers and the qualitative researchers really just wouldn't even talk to each other. But I'm happy to say it's really not like that in departments anymore, or quite as much like that. Um, Again, working with young people and community partners really inspires me for the fourth topic, which is making social and scientific progress. So the idea is we don't have to sacrifice one in order to achieve the other. We can do both at the same time. And I think mixed methods helps because again, it's incorporating perspectives that might otherwise not be included. And it allows you to communicate research to a wide audience. And what I mean by that is sometimes when presenting a quantitative only presentation, there's a capacity to try to maybe assume that people will understand exactly how to interpret the data or understand the data. But I think if you have qualitative data in addition to quantitative data, it can reach a wider audience because people can connect emotionally with some of the quotes or some of the stories and experiences that are told in a narrative form. And so, therefore, I think when making presentations to people that are not researchers themselves. It could be in your own academic community, or it could be working with organizations and schools and clinics or hospitals, people that are not researchers. It allows you to bring the data to life when you can actually pinpoint how qualitative data relates to quantitative measures. And it doesn't have to support or agree with it. It can diverge, but it's even within that divergence is a very intriguing kind of story that you can tell that is very relatable and very critical for people to appreciate and understand and respect science and what we can contribute and help people understand as social scientists. The last point I just want to make here is that I think mixed methods is very exciting because it helps amplify your own research creativity. So just as a person, as a researcher, it's fun because it calls forth our inner creative ilk for playing with data. And when you get to joint displays and graphic displays that try to compare and make sense with meta inferences about key findings from different strands and pull them together, it's very exciting because there are a lot of different possibilities and choices. And it's not necessarily easy at first to understand the data when joining it together, but I've seen some very interesting joint displays, which are visual displays using like circle diagrams and color coding data to pair like a quote in say red font with a statistic that's in red as well. So there's various different ways to amplify your own creativity as a researcher, and I think that's exciting and important, especially for people who have to do research for a living. So let's get to the heart of what is covered in this particular book. And I just created this diagram to show you the flow of the book so you could get a sense for the different parts and how it introduces you to the core designs that are covered and then helps you with things that are universal to research, like presenting, writing, publications, and grants. So, in chapter one, as I mentioned earlier in the webinar, I do try to present the different scientific philosophy and principles that undergird mixed methods and show how the jump from single method research to sort of the multi-trait, multi-method approach, and then expanding from there with program evaluation, research, and other types of research has sort of gotten us to this place. So that's in chapter one. And I also go over key definitions and do a quick review of what is quantitative research, what is qualitative research, so that everyone can sort of be on the same page starting on this journey of what is mixed methods. Then for chapter two, actually, a colleague of mine, Dr. Magda Groman, helped me design chapter two because I wanted to have a chapter that provided what I would call our 10 pretty much standard or universally applied design principles for any type of mixed methods design. So I wanted to create chapters where you could read them if need be in isolation and not necessarily, I mean, this is designed to be read in sequence, but we know that people bounce around in books. We don't necessarily start on page one and end on page, what is it here? Like 100, I think this is like 150 pages. So we know that people don't read books that way and as to information literacy and literacy on research methods. So I wanted to have a chapter where people could just go to and grab the essentials if need be when they're designing something and quick needed it fast if they were going in rushing into a team meeting or had a meeting with a program manager or designing a grant, so they could just go to chapter two and walk through what were the key design essentials universal to any type of mixed methods. And then what I did is I combed through the APA mixed methods article reporting standards to look at exactly what are they advising. I also looked at the standards that NIH has for submitting mixed methods research because they've done a lot of great like working group and white papers on what is mixed methods. So I looked at NIH's standards and mixed methods. I looked at ARA, American Educational Research Association standards, and then I tried to look in, as any in NSF or any other federal agencies, examined what makes a rigorous mixed methods study. So I tried to incorporate all of that. So we really are caught up with all the trends in mixed methods over the past 30 years. And I'll show that table a little bit later so you can look at it directly in terms of the 10 design essentials. Now, the meat of the book, or for all of us who are vegetarians, the veggies of the book, the core veggies of the book, are chapters 3, 4, and 5. And so chapter 3 goes over the sequential design, and we polled you earlier to ask you which types of designs you had direct experience with. And it looks like we had 44% response rate in terms of, so that was the most popularly or most widespread used design is sequential. And that really kind of confirms what I've found in the literature. And you may know that as well from your own experience working with mixed methods. Are the sequential designs are the most frequently used and most published upon. Sequential designs are broken into two areas, exploratory and explanatory. So explanatory is using a quantitative survey, for example, and then interviewing people and clustering them based on their survey responses, for example, and asking them questions that are directly related to extend the data on those topics. And so the interview questions are tightly linked to the survey item questions typically. If we look at sequential exploratory, we flip-flop that design and we swap the order in which the data strands are collected. For instance, you would first do a focus group, for example, if you wanted to create or revise a survey and ask individuals about their experience on a specific topic, and then use that information after you've transcribed and coded that focus group to build out or revise a survey or specific assessment or measurement that you're wishing to change a little bit to make it more relevant to that particular group. So now we go to chapter 4. Chapter 4 is on convergent. So convergent designs are probably sort of a default design. So in our poll, we had 30% of our respondents say that they have experience using the convergent design. So convergent originally was called concurrent or parallel designs, in which you would collect data quantitative and qualitatively without reviewing it prior to collecting the second strand of data. And so you would do both at the same time, and you do not have time in between the data collection phases to analyze and review it necessarily. It's just you're doing both at the same time. And so sometimes I say it's by default is because we don't have control over the timeline or control over the recruitment timeline for participants in terms of which thing they're doing when. So this is one where there's less control and there's less purposeful design planned into the overall study. For chapter 5, I had mentioned earlier that when reviewing existing resources, I did not find a lot of reference to how to conduct an experimental mixed methods design. I thought it'd be very exciting to include reference to steps to help people walk through different considerations. So, as part of that, I included 3 different variations of that design. So, there's a case study experimental design, arts based experimental designs, also quasi-experimental designs for people like us in education in schools, and then that are not doing direct lab-based work. Um, and then there's designs that include a physiological data collection aspect to it as well. And for that chapter, I actually had a lot of fun creating a table that gives suggestions for placing interviews before, during, or after running an intervention or a specific type of treatment. And so there's different ways of using an interview technique vis-a-vis placed carefully with an intervention as part of an experimental mixed methods design. So that was a lot of fun. And I see that 37% of the people in our poll today indicated they weren't sure about the design that they use. And I'm really excited that I stuck that response in there for Andrea to give as in terms of not sure, because I think sometimes people do mixed methods and it becomes kind of like a kitchen sink approach because you're immersed in a project or you're invited onto a project that's an ongoing large scale project. And so there's a lot of moving parts and you don't exactly know or have control over the different design elements. And so you're collecting data in on a lot of different things. And so I think it's perfectly legitimate to say, "Hey, I'm not sure exactly what you would call this design." And so I think that it's exciting to try to figure out um, I mean, if possible, before you start your study, what kind of design you would want to use. But when right now I'm teaching a mixed methods class, I ask the doctoral students to compare and contrast at least 2 designs to weigh the benefits and the disadvantages of the 2 designs, because otherwise it can be very overwhelming. I've noticed that it can be very overwhelming for students or people new to mixed methods to think about all these various designs. And so right now, they're basically comparing, trying to narrow it down to just 2. And then after narrowing it down to 2 different designs, which is best for me, which is best for my research questions and my research topic, and then just narrowing it down to 1 and doing a deep dive in that one. So it's totally legitimate not to know necessarily upfront um, what you're doing or which is best for for your project. So let me now go to chapter 6 and 7. Chapter 6 and 7 are really critical. Chapter 6, I spent probably um, the longest on, or maybe one of the longest writing, because it includes more recent conceptions of validity. And I do discuss what is validity and reliability in terms of qualitative and quantitative conceptions, excuse me, because they've developed differently in those fields. But now with mixed methods validity, there, I think Green, Caroselli, and Graham in the 90s actually really started to help us understand triangulation in mixed methods. And so they really started to put forth some different suggested names for triangulation, and to understand triangulation across quantitative and qualitative. And since then, it's really taken off. So there are social justice interpretations of validity and feminist interpretations of validity that are as equally as important in the field as those original uh, issues of triangulation. So what I tried to do is go back in the field when we started talking about triangulation, and now look where we are and get sort of a good scan of the environment of these different validity terms. So there's a nice table in there on validity. And then there's also a suggestions for how to conduct integration at the sampling stage, integration at the results stage, and integration at the interpretation stage. I also talk about joint displays, which are side-by-side tables that are using columns to represent your main findings across the different strands. And then typically a third column is included called meta inferences, which tries to make an interpretation of the most salient findings when comparing the qualitative and quantitative data. For the last chapter, chapter 7, I do talk about writing, presenting, planning for grants with mixed methods, and publication strategies, because oftentimes people complain that they have so much data they don't have enough space in an article to publish on it, or they might get a tepid response from an editor about mixed methods because not everyone is amenable to publishing mixed methods. So I do have an appendix that gives a list of professional organizations in the area of mixed methods to help people find different communities of researchers in that area. And then the other appendix does give a list of journals that publish mixed methods research, and they specifically say on their website that they're open to publishing mixed methods research. So what are some unique book features? I already touched on some, but I do want to let you know that when I started this book, I formed a student advisory board of master's and doctoral students across education and psychology to help shape the tone of the book. Again, it's supposed to be like a very friendly and welcoming book that's very easy to understand and easy to use. They all reviewed the chapters in addition to the peer reviews and the editorial process to help explain and break down concepts even more in my writing. And so it was amazing. There were 6 students that worked on that. I did explain that I included for chapter 2 the 10 essential mixed methods design elements, and those are core to all to successful publishing, to include those elements no matter what design you're using. And then I also use expert quotes. So what I did is I reached out to key experts, and I worked with 4 different people, and I asked them different questions about how did they come to learn about the particular design that they published on. And I wanted not just for them to give advice for executing that design and publishing it. I wanted to show the evolution of their learning in the design, which is very different. So I asked them, how'd you get interested in not your research topic, but how'd you get interested in the particular design? What were the things that excited you about using this design? What are some mistakes you might have made? How did you learn how to use it and come to use it? So there's those quotes are layered in, and so I worked with 4 different, mixed methods experts, and that was really exciting for me to talk with them. The last piece is that each chapter has reflection questions, and so it's really designed for the learner. So all the chapters are designed for the learner to reflect on how to adapt each design or each element of the chapters that are relevant to them, and then use it and incorporate it in their own project. So the reflection questions, I know that's common. Pretty much every book has reflection questions, but that is in addition to the steps that I use to break down the methods into steps, and then the diagrams I use, the visual diagrams to explain how to the different steps as well. This is an example of the 10 mixed methods design essentials that are in that chapter 2. And some of these features are used just in research in general, like a persuasive research problem. Okay, we know that everyone needs to describe a persuasive research problem. But what I want to do is not just say that's important, but I wanted to give examples. So in chapter 2, I have all these 10 essential design elements. But then what I did is I went into published journal articles and I gave examples just from published mixed methods journal articles so people could see that, this is how I could incorporate this design element into my research project. Because here's actual example. And then if I want to go read about the article, here's the citation for the article. I can go download and read it myself. So just a couple points here because I know that um, we want to get to everyone's questions today in our webinar. So besides intentional mixed methods rationale, dual study aims. So there's a couple things that are sort of more recent and new in mixed methods in terms of the evolution of what is required. And so having an intentional mixed methods rationale and dual study aims means specifying not what's the aim of the research project, but what is the aim specifically of the quantitative strand and what is the aim specifically of the qualitative strand. And then I noticed that a lot of learners aren't necessarily aware of the importance of looking at what are the methodological gaps in past literature. So not just looking at theoretical framework and what are the major literature gaps in past research, but specifically when looking at what methods are used in prior studies, what are the gaps in that particular area? So there's a great research article that is included that is looking at STEM identity and looking at how it's been measured in various ways. And they describe that STEM identity for youth, people haven't, done a lot of, I think it was a lot of focus groups in a particular area. So they were saying we really need to get people's voices and understand young people's perspectives. And so they described how they could not find a lot of single method studies that use qualitative. So they decided to use mixed methods to incorporate the advances in measurement and couple it with qualitative to bring new light to the topic. All right, so I just have a couple slides left, and then we can get to questions and have more of a conversation, which will be very fun in the webinar. And so some of the questions that people submitted when registering to the Zoom had to do with roadblocks to teaching and what are some example assignments and false myths. So I would say there's a couple different false myths. The first is that you have to be amazing in both stats and qualitative to do mixed methods. And so I talk about that in chapter 1 about how you don't have to be an expert in all research methodologies before attempting to initiate a mixed method study. And the reason is because you can, through collaboration, gain the requisite skills to make it a really strong and rigorous project, as long as you know that you have the research expertise covered in your team members. I think that you have to have a basic understanding in both areas, but you don't have to be an expert in all areas prior to launching into your first mixed methods project. The second question that I get, and you'll see this in the literature, is um, why is it or is it the case that quantitative methods always dominate in mixed method studies? And I address that in the chapters in terms of weighting strategies known as designating a priority status to either the quant or the qual, or having them hold equal status. And so I think that there was sort of like a bias in a lot of the literature, probably like more in the late 90s, early 2000s, where the mixed methods literature would just assume that we're going to start every mixed methods project with a quantitative strand and then have a qualitative strand. And that, of course, is relegating qualitative research to inferior status. So now people discuss that we have many options, and it's important to actually describe which option you're using. Are you weighting both strands equally, or are you subjugating one to the other and provide a reason why? So the other thing that I try to cultivate in classes is just an appreciation for both quantitative and qualitative research. It's not that one is bad or worse or invalid. And sometimes students who are embarking on dissertations that are mixed methods come across a divide in their dissertation committee members where um, some members never experience training related to mixed methods and they don't see how it can be valid. So I think this book can really help, because if you have a book like this, you can use it with your dissertation committee members and you can share different chapters as well and sort of like share and educate as you go along. Another false myth is that older, more advanced students have to lead projects. And so I talk about this idea of stratified mentoring, where in research teams, different students can highlight their skills and their preferences for working on different parts of a mixed methods project while still learning about another aspect of the project from someone else. So I try to sort of push back a little bit on the expert always has to be first author or the expert always has to be the lead in a mixed methods project. I think mixed methods projects really lend themselves well to, if done well, having a cohesive team, but giving different team members different tasks to work on and letting those team members shine in their special area while still learning from other people. So some of the roadblocks, I think for teaching, some of the roadblocks are if you don't have enough time to really discuss mixed methods sufficiently, if professors or researchers or program directors might not have training mixed methods, then again, using something like this book, or maybe even just like a chapter one, introducing a program director or a university official to it, can really help pave the way in acceptance to offering courses in mixed methods. So I have an appendix with mixed methods programs in the United States and professional organizations. Some students or some researchers face the roadblock of journals who don't frequently publish or don't publish at all in mixed methods. And it's true, you do have to find a good fit. And so for that case, I have an appendix list of journals that publish mixed methods. Sometimes with working in the field, we find resistance to assessment among communities. And so I do in chapter one have two examples of positionality statements that are from published mixed methods journal articles. And the goal is to give examples for how you can work on building a relationship with the community in discussing one's positionality at the beginning of the project and not, waiting until the middle of the project. And then I had a great question from a student the other week, and she asked, how do I get IRB approval for a mixed methods phase that has not yet been developed? And so what we talked about is trying to anticipate what all your data collection protocols are at that onset, and then if need be, tweaking them or changing them, and then adding amendment to your IRB if you need it, if your data changes or you create a new part of an assessment, for example, based on the qualitative strand. You can add that on at a later point. So we have a wonderful first assignment in this particular, in the mixed methods course I'm teaching, which is you use the 10 mixed methods design essentials to evaluate a published article and then act as an editorial assistant or associate editor and provide recommendations to improve the articulation of the mixed methods design. So that's one of the assignments I use in my classes, and that is really fun. We discuss convergent models by thinking of reasons to transform a data set both quantitatively and qualitatively. And then the last thing is we introduce special techniques such as projective art activities in classes for students to try out together prior to designing a mixed methods project that's experimental. So that's something we've done in classes. And then this is my last slide, so we can start with the question and answer. What I'm hoping to do is to build an enhanced instructor resources with students and be able to post one-pagers on the apa.org website made available right next to where you would see the book appear on the book's landing page. And eventually, I would love to create plans for a mixed methods book series, focusing on special methodological issues and focusing on designs applied to different disciplines in the social sciences. So thank you, everyone. And I'm happy to work with Andrea to start looking at some of the questions.
Great, thank you so much. Again, if you have questions, please submit them through the Q&A button on the bottom of the screen. We do have a few that we could go through here. We've got about 5 minutes. First question, one of the challenges I faced is if I'm using mixed methods, do I plan my study accordingly or do I conduct separate qualitative and quantitative studies and triangulate them? Oh, you're muted, Jen, if you're answering. Sorry.
Thank you. Can you read that off again so I
Yeah.
can make sure I understand it? Thank you.
One of the challenges I've faced is if I'm using mixed methods, do I plan my study accordingly or do I conduct separate qualitative and quantitative studies and triangulate them?
That's a great question. So in chapter 2 in the 10 mixed methods design essentials, the first thing that I go over are all of the ways to design research questions and or hypotheses, and then thirdly, a mixed methods research question. And so I would advise not doing the study separately, but creating an overall umbrella design, mixed methods design, and then housing the separate phases of the study under that umbrella design. So if you develop your research questions first off, and or I don't know if you have hypotheses or a mixed methods research question. So a mixed methods research question would join the quantitative and the qualitative together. And that way it's not disjointed. So I recommend doing one umbrella mixed methods study.
Thank you. The next question, can you discuss the best practices of mixing methods as an aim in a study without being repetitive of the other aims that are separate, qualitative or quantitative aims?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the things you'll notice about published mixed methods research articles is they can get a little bit wordy in with the research, the aims and the research questions because um, you want to separate them out as was suggested in the webinar and what you're suggesting in the question. So you do want to clarify what the separate aims are. But I think it's possible just to have um, sort of a mother or parent, if you will, qualitative aim and quantitative aim, and then break it down into separate research questions with underneath those aims so it doesn't get too confusing. I think mixed methods can be challenging in that way that sometimes you get lost in all that, the scientific aspect of it. But if you can keep your um, a level of organization to it and clarity, I think would really help to have, say, two aims and then break down into the individual research questions or hypotheses. Thank you.
We have a really interesting question from Benjamin Graham. I know there's been a lot of discussion about AI and qualitative analysis. Are you aware of any applications of AI that bridge the two approaches in some way?
That's a great question. I forgot to include that in the webinar about how to use AI in your analysis approaches. There's definitely a lot of great advances in most data analysis software incorporates AI to some extent in different ways, and I think it's still developing and adapting, you know. So I know that if you use Intellectus qualitative and quantitative software, what they do is they have a large language model that'll go through and code for themes, for example, in the transcriptions that are posted. And then they run kappas on those themes. And so you can go in and look at the themes and verify the themes as well. So it's sort of a process in terms of the themes provided for you, as well as the themes that you can create yourself or verify the AI generated themes. And then I think in NVivo, there's a great webinar 2 years ago that NVivo ran in terms of just using trying to join your quantitative and qualitative analyses together in the software itself. So there's definitely ways to do it using the software. I would say the downside is that sometimes it just takes a while or can cost a lot of money depending on the software you want to use.
Um, One more question, I think, going kind of to the top of our presentation, and the purpose of mixed methods. Sandra asks, from what I've learned about mixed methods, it's more than just combining qualitative and quantitative methods. It should give more meaning to results that you may not find using a single method. And could you please give, I guess, more context or explain what kind of meaning it may give to those results?
Sure, I can just very quickly, just because it's on the top of my head, talk about one of my studies. Like right now, what we're doing is actually we had surveyed and then done individual interviews with students, and we wanted to know the extent to which their personal identity affected their team practices. And statistically, what we found is that there was no effect in our mediation model of psychological safety, mediating team creativity, and identity salience. Um, However, what we found is when we just looked at the responses, about half the students indicated that their personal identity mattered to their teaming practices, and about half said that it didn't. So then we went into the interview data and we found that um, the students described their identity in really various and unique ways, which would explain why the mediation model didn't work out. So, for example, we had some students say that they felt ignored, alienated, or isolated due to their race or gender, whereas other students didn't feel that way. They said, "Oh, felt really comfortable with my team, and I felt like I could share my ideas." So it really was split in half. And if we didn't ask the interview questions, then we wouldn't understand why that mediation model didn't work. And we wouldn't understand why some students felt safe psychologically and other students didn't. So by asking the students directly, we were able to have them just tell us, um, you know, how they felt in their teams.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for being here with us today. I want to thank all of our attendees for being here. Please look out for a recording and your attendance certificate as soon as we have them available. Jen, thank you for all of your expertise and for writing this wonderful book. And I hope everyone has a great afternoon.
Thanks so much. And my email was, I think is my email here in case
Yes,
anyone wants to
it
contact.
is.
It is. Okay, I couldn't see
It's
it.
there.
Thank
It's
you so
there.
much. Have a great day.
Thank you all.